Welcome to Illuminate 2017. Please welcome to the stage today's host and Sumo Logic's VP of Marketing and Communication, Aaron Bake.
Illuminate! All right, welcome everyone. I'm so thrilled that so many people are here today and have checked in. We're over 350 people who have checked in for this conference, and the broader Sumo Logic community that's joining us on the live webcast. So exciting. I'm thrilled and very proud to be hosting the first Sumo Logic user conference. I joined Sumo about 3 years ago, and it's been an incredible, amazing ride. The momentum of the company and this community has really led us to this spot, the ability to do a user conference. I've been in this sector for almost 25 years, and I really appreciate how hard it is and what has to happen in the market for us to be able to have the opportunity to have an event like this. So it's very exciting. Illuminate is an extension of our online community efforts. And though our digital lives have really evolved and are growing, in large part because of many of you, nothing makes up for the face-to-face. And that's really why we're here. We're here as humans to connect with one another, look each other in the eyes, roll up our sleeves, share some best practices, break some bread, have some beers, maybe 2 or 3, and enjoy ourselves. So thank you for being here. And everyone who's dialed into the webcast, we hope to see you in the coming years. So this is day 2 of Illuminate. Yesterday was really more of the boot camp, and we did certifications for most of the day. We had almost 250 people go through certifications, so congratulations to all of those folks. Please join me in a round of applause. Today we're going to go deeper on expert sessions and customer stories. We'll start with a keynote here with Ramin, Sayar, Sumo Logic CEO, and then we'll have a couple special guests join him from Acquia and Hearst. Towards the end, I'll join Ramin and we'll do a fireside chat with Reid Hoffman, really one of the icons of modern business, co-founder of LinkedIn. Very excited to hear what he has to say about what's on his mind these days. We'll then go into sessions throughout the day, expert sessions, panels, and customer stories. And we'll end from 5 to 7 with an appreciation event called the Taste of San Francisco. We've invited many of the engineers and product teams from Sumo Logic to join us in this appreciation party. So please stick around for this. Eat some fabulous food, meet these people, have a drink or two, and spend some time with your peers. So before I close, I want to thank 2 important groups that really are making this conference possible. The 8 customers that you see on the back in their logos, these people worked incredibly hard, their time, enthusiasm, and expertise to share their stories today with all of you. So I really want to appreciate them. The second group, and just as important, are all of the sponsors. I mean, really leaders in the cloud era who said, we want to support Sumo Logic and the Sumo community. The generous funding from these people and these companies has been extraordinary. So please join me in a round of appreciation for these 2 important groups. Now, I want to do, before I hand off, I want to actually play a short video. And the video is the essence of what we mean by the modern world. And hopefully it'll give you a sense of what we're talking about here at this conference, the role of Sumo Logic and digital experiences in all of our lives. So run video.
More and more each day, business and life are being shaped by digital experiences. At the heart of these digital experiences are modern applications, and companies that build these applications depend on speed and agility to be successful. This is a modern application. It's not a single thing. It's a whole new world of thousands of components and millions of connections constantly changing. Every process and action on every component generates huge volumes of machine data that gets captured as logs and time series metrics. That machine data is full of raw intelligence. Digital businesses need that intelligence, but they can't unlock it. The current tools just can't handle the complexity of modern applications. So insights remain in the dark. It's one of the greatest challenges facing digital businesses today. How can they use machine data to compete in the new world of compelling digital experiences? The best and the brightest companies are solving this problem by turning their machine data into continuous intelligence with the help of Sumo Logic. First, these modern application companies are using Sumo Logic's machine learning and advanced analytics to extract valuable intelligence from their log data. And now, these companies are correlating their log and metrics data together in real time for deeper insights into application needs and new customer opportunities. Continuous intelligence makes data insights easily shareable across a broad set of teams responsible for building, running, and securing modern applications. This realizes Sumo Logic's vision to democratize machine data analytics across many users and use cases. No more grepping in the dark. The big picture, the past, present, and future all become visible from a single platform shared across the entire organization. With continuous intelligence, modern application companies are redefining what it means to compete in the new world by building machine data analytics into their DNA to speed the decision-making that results in the world's best digital experiences. Illuminate the new world. Sumo Logic, continuous intelligence for modern apps.
Okay. Thank you. So with that, please join me in welcoming to stage Sumo Logic CEO, Ramin Sayar.
Thank you. Wow. This is inspiring, very emotional. It's interesting to sit here in front of you and reflect back on how we got here. It was just about 3 months ago where we actually made the decision and pulled the chute. And that meant that we had to motivate an entire part of the organization, let alone the whole company, to pull this off. So thank you from the bottom of our hearts in terms of your commitment to spend time here with us, not just yesterday and today, but again, going forward in the future. You're part of something revolutionary, and this community is really important for us and hopefully for you. So as I look at the opportunity ahead of us, it's important to reflect on who's here and why they're here. As we look at the various companies that have attended this conference, either through the certifications and training that we've done yesterday, in fact, we did not only did 250, but in total we've done well over 400 training and certifications over the last couple of weeks. That's a testament to what's going on here. It's all about the change, the revolutionary change that's taken place in this industry. If you look at every single vertical, geography, not just location, but also attendees that are here, it's actually playing out exactly how we envisioned over 7 years ago in terms of our mission and vision to democratize machine data. And it's all because this group here, our users, our community, and together. I'm amazed to see the diversity in roles that are here today, and not just here, but also even online attending the streaming conference. We have folks from security, whether Chief Information Security Officer, security analysts, folks from operations, from tech ops, site reliability engineers, developers, DevOps teams. We have Chief Technology Officers, CIOs, and the list goes on and on. The interesting aspect is there's so much diversity in the roles, but there's so much we share in common with respect to our really vision and our mission together to really be able to bring machine data out of the dark into the light and illuminate the insights together. As we look at how we got here today, during the weekend I was preparing for this event and my 2 boys asked me, "Why are you so nervous? Why are you so excited?" And I thought about it for a second, and how do you explain to a 12-year-old, 9-year-old, like what this conference is all about? And the thing that struck me, it was so evident, is a lot of the digital services that I use, that you use, that most of us use every single day, are powered by things that you build, powered by things that we all use and interact with every day. And I thought that's probably the best way that I could explain it to them. So I started to lay out a few things, and I realized that's something that's so powerful that I felt that we needed to share together as part of this community. So I want to take a day in the life of what something looks like for me in terms of some of the digital services that I use. And this is not a comprehensive list. This is just a small sampling of that. So like many of you, I get up in the morning and I look at what's going on in the world. I look at the New York Times. Get a quick catch up, and then I look at my Twitter feed. I'm following a bunch of people, companies, and unfortunately, a lot of the drama that's coming out of the White House. And I try to not pay attention to that. So quickly I change my focus as the boys get up and we have breakfast together, hopefully most mornings during the week. And guess what they have? Toast and butter, Land O'Lakes. Later on, as we motivate and finally get them out the door and pack their bags, we arm the house, security cameras, we're using Canary. And then the day starts. So after I drop them off at school, BBC goes on, I'm trying to figure out what's going on in the world from politics and also policy, if you're familiar with a lot of the streaming services that they provide. And as I get to work, I'm right in it. First thing I'm looking at is the Sumo dashboards, getting a sense of what's going on with our users, with our customers, with a few other telemetry type of sources that probably many of you use, but I look at an aggregate. As the morning starts to kick in, we start to go to a routine. But before I get to the sales forecast call with Steve and his team, I realize I got to book a trip because I'm heading up north. So of course, I try to be very conscious of fares. I use Expedia. I book a trip on Alaska, and of course, I stay at the Marriott. So after I book the trip, I go straight into Steve's forecast meeting. And his sales managers using obviously Salesforce, Clary, and a bunch of other tools, and we come out of that right into the next thing, prospect call. We're using a streaming video conference and service. And as I look at what we just talked about in terms of the opportunities in Salesforce, and I transition to a customer and prospect meeting, it reminds me of something as we finish. I'm actually supposed to take my family to visit in-laws and guests, and I hadn't booked the ticket yet. So, of course, I used Delta. We stay at Airbnb because we can't stay with our family, right? It's a little too close. And soon thereafter, after I pay for it, I realize, wow, we have a lot going on today. We have a whole new digital campaign that we're about to roll out, and I haven't even seen the creative work. So quickly I jump into the marketing meeting, figure out what they're working on, and then I have to, from there, head out and look at, well, what's the finance doing? How are we doing accounts receivable, payable? How are we doing on revenue forecasts? So we use a variety of tools, Xero being one of them, and a few others. And unfortunately, soon thereafter, I get this email reminder that the results from my DNA test came back, which triggered a memory. Triggered a memory that I'm getting to that age where I need those more frequent checkups, if you know what I mean. So I book an appointment with a doctor, fortunately. And as I'm realizing I'm getting older and starting to not be so confident, an old buddy pings me on text and says he's in town. He'd like to grab a beer. So suddenly I'm motivated again. I go down the street, grab a beer at the pub. Obviously, Anheuser-Busch or AB InBev is one of our customers. So they have Stella and Bud and others on tap. So we grab a beer and recharge myself. And as I'm heading home, I got to stop by and grab some food at Whole Foods, now Amazon, right? And I walk in the door. Of course, the boys don't greet you, right? They're too busy. What are they busy doing? Listening to music streaming through Sonos. And it's like, hi, Dad. It's like, well, thanks for acknowledging me. But nonetheless, as we get through that and we sit down for dinner, we start to think through, well, what happened today? My boys are big baseball fans and obviously like to track the Giants. Unfortunately, we're not doing that great this year, but there's always next year. And so we quickly look at MLB to catch up on the scores. Nothing's really changed. We're still losing. And as we look at kind of finishing the day and the night, boys start to pack it off. I look at what's going on the next day in terms of my activities and my calendar, and then I look at what digital feeds, what sort of social media things I need to look at. So I use Hootsuite. And as I go back upstairs to check in on them, they're both studying. What are they using? Online textbooks from McGraw-Hill. And as the evening starts to wind down, I make sure the lights are off. I use Samsung SmartThings. I finally get a moment to sit with Samantha, my wife, reflect back on the day, and appreciate everything that's happened. And appreciate the realization that everything that I use every single day is what you build, what you power, the digital services that empowers a lot of our daily lives. So thank you for making such a big impact on me and the rest of the community. So as I reflect back on the Sumo day in the life of, it's hard not to reflect back on how we got here today at this inaugural conference. It started over 7 years ago when our founders attended an event from AWS where the CTO was talking about the possibilities, the art of possibilities. And he was really focused on what you guys can do on our platform is not worry about the headaches of building and managing servers and infrastructure. You can write code faster, and you can start to leverage this platform to do new, unique, disruptive things. So we had a different idea brewed at that point in time. The founders came from the background of the traditional security information event management space. The machine data space had not yet arisen. They had a light in their mind, they had an idea in their mind that we got to bring machine data out of the dark into the light. Hence why we're here at Illuminate. They felt that there was a possibility to democratize machine data and start to allow users from not just security teams, not just operations teams, but throughout the organization be able to leverage the powerful insights. So in 2010, we're fortunate enough to have Greylock fund us in Series A, and quickly everything started to move faster and faster for us. A couple years later, we introduced our first product, the first capabilities. We started to launch a free service. We ended up starting to quickly build new features. We obviously had to design a lot of things from the ground up with respect to security because it wasn't yet there in terms of public cloud infrastructure, in terms of a lot of things around our PKI, encryption, transit and rest. So we had to build all these sorts of security and compliance capabilities because we wanted to make sure that sensitive data, sensitive workloads, sensitive information was never going to be compromised. So from early on, not only do we have the vision to build an elastic, scalable machine data analytics platform, but the industry's most secure platform as well. So soon thereafter, we realized it's not just about a different idea. We actually embarked on the next phase of this journey. It's about scaling. It's about constantly re-architecting components in our system because demand was over the top. We started to see volumes and volumes of data come in faster than we anticipated. And there's some core capabilities in our stack that we had rewritten, re-architected so that we can have massive distributed scale. And as we were doing that, we also realized that some customers are starting to use it beyond security or operations for other means. So we really started to double down on our core IP with respect to analytics. So we started to bring a lot of capabilities around transaction analytics. We started to add outlier predictor operators, and the list goes on and on. At the same time, we started to get recognition in industry. Some of the analysts started to understand there's something new. There's something different here. These guys are onto something. Wow, I didn't realize they're actually delivering such a powerful, scalable service. That's when things started to change for us, because we started to see an adoption that was unprecedented. The volume of data, not just from security and operations, but now from applications, started to grow immensely. Applications started being re-architected, and I'll talk more about that a little bit later. We started then to build more capabilities around specifically microservices-based architectures, moving away from traditional three-tier legacy apps. We passed some more certifications, we built some more analytics, and we started to expand internationally into other regions. So as we embarked upon this phase, we thought, wow, this is amazing. Not only do we have volume of data, volume of customers, and now different use cases, but we started to realize something different. We started to realize that we're becoming the platform of choice, and we have the opportunity to become the standard for this new way that modern applications need to be built, run, and secure. So obviously, different views for different folks. Some of our users like to tail logs. We introduced a bunch of capabilities around live tail, and we brought to the market the first time ever the notion of unification of data, both semi-structured and unstructured data in the form of logs, events, and metrics. It's been amazing to see the adoption of those capabilities, in addition to the breadth and extension of our analytics to support the various types of data sets. But it wasn't just about new features, and it wasn't just about the fact that we're supporting new capabilities in our cloud infrastructure. We realized in about 2016, heading into 2017, we started to get massive adoption. We embarked upon the 1,000 customer mark. we started to hit on 100 plus petabytes of data a day. We knew we were onto something. We knew we had a massive opportunity ahead of us. And we knew that we had to be able to leverage this platform we built to provide more continuous intelligence and insights, not just for us, but also for our community and users. So then shortly thereafter, we launched the industry's first, what we refer to as a modern application report. And I'll give you some highlights and updates later today about that as well. Then we shifted and started to add more capabilities in our stack, not just for monitoring and troubleshooting, because we realized there was a fundamental flaw with a lot of traditional security mechanisms and tools, and more importantly, processes. So we embedded the first capabilities around integrated threat intelligence, and here, now, it leads us up to the first inaugural Illuminate conference. As Aaron mentioned a little bit earlier, we're absolutely blown away by the adoption and attendance, not just yesterday, but over 400 certifications that we've completed together over the last few weeks. So thank you and congratulations to everyone involved there. But what's more interesting is, wow, that seems great, and that seems fantastic. We're just at the beginning. While we've gotten through 3 eras or 3 parts of our journey, what's more fascinating for me when I started to look at the amount of machine data growth that's out there, Barclays put out a report recently, or a couple years ago, that predicts that over the next 4 years, machine data growth is going to grow 4x. And that equates to roughly 16 zettabytes of data. Now, for some of you who are probably not familiar with what 16 zettabytes are, kind of like I was, I had to Google it to understand, and then I had to figure out an analogy to explain it. So the best simple way I could explain it is, who uses Netflix? Most of us. The Netflix library is massive, right? So imagine if we streamed the Netflix library 30 million times. That's what 16 zettabytes of data is. And right now, we're at just a small fraction of that. And that 16 zettabytes of data will be more than 40% of the total machine data that's generated by 2020. So while some people may think that this is a big data problem, we think otherwise. We think this is a big data opportunity. And this is why you're here. This is why we're here together. And we like to think about this in a different way, not just about big data problem or opportunity, but the big opportunity of the new world, what we refer to as the analytics economy. And that's something that's powered and driven by machine data, which we believe is the lingua franca of today. So what does that really mean, though? Well, like I mentioned earlier in terms of digital services and experience, and like you saw in the video in terms of various digital services streaming like a river through our daily experience, that's what's driving this. That's what's driving a lot of the fear and greed. And that, what I mean by that is there's a massive transformation that's taken place, not just for digital transformation to gain that competitive advantage and edge, but there's implications that has to how and where we build these. Obviously, it's on public cloud infrastructures. Obviously, it's through mobile first. But that's really powerful because it's providing a new set of insights to make decisions faster with speed and drive agility in terms of how we release and iterate on feedback and services that people are using or not using. And that's opening up a whole slew of new services that are either replacing existing legacy ones or creating new markets and new category kings. What's interesting about that is just not the fact that there's massive transformation here. It's because one thing, modern applications. Modern applications are fundamentally different now than they were several years ago, let alone 5 to 10 years ago. Why is that? And how have we gotten here? Well, as I look back, and I've been in the tech space for well over 20 years, and I've worked in all parts of the modern application stack. And it's unbelievable to see the trend that's taken place now and how quickly that's accelerating. Not too long ago, when I worked as a product role in a startup, we focused on how do you actually instrument 3-tier applications, a web server, app server, database, and tracing was very simple. Then we started to evolve into service-oriented architectures where it got a little more complex, and you had things like UDI or directory services to understand components and services. And it started to open up an opportunity for now, with the opportunity that we're in with respect to microservices, containers, and even more disruptive technologies like serverless, like Lambda. And that even feeds things like connected devices and IoT. So while components are getting smaller in applications, what's interesting is at the same time, they're accelerating in terms of scale. Massive scale, smaller sizes, much more distributed in nature, which creates complexity. Why? Legacy tools just can't keep up. They can't instrument, they can't collect, they can't analyze, they're not relevant. And so that opens up a whole new landscape for us to work together to be able to provide a continuous intelligence platform to be able to address this. What's the implications of this? One, we need a new platform. So what is that platform? We believe that platform is based on an idea, and that idea is around continuous intelligence. That idea is based on the fact that you need a platform that mirrors not only the infrastructure, but the core components of a modern application. One that actually has a few core essence of delivery and architecture. First and foremost, something that's always on and truly elastic. Secondly, multi-tenant, cloud native, not cloud washed. Third, dynamic, scalable, and secure. Fourth, supervised and unsupervised and patented machine learning capabilities. And last but definitely not least, architected, built, delivered, and consumed as a service. So while we believe that we've been onto something for a while, and in fact 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago, we launched our point of view around continuous intelligence and the fact that it has massive implications for the new architectures of applications, we started to see some recognition from the industry. Not just from customers like you or partners who are integrating to us, but also from industry analysts. So we saw ESG, IDC, 451, EMA, and a whole slew of others start to talk about this whole notion of continuous intelligence, the need for new architectures, new tools, as more and more modern apps, DevOps teams, and processes came about. But most recently, I think someone did a massive and a very important job for the industry. And that, believe it or not, was Gartner. Gartner recently put out a survey that said by 2020, those companies who do not evolve and change the fundamental way that they manage operations day to day and think of it from a continuous perspective and have core capabilities around predictive analysis, around focus for experience and measuring that, and have integration to various delivery tools and architectures will not be around. They will not be relevant. Teams will be gone, and you'll be left in the dark. So that's pretty profound for Gartner to say, evolve or die. But that's the reality. That's why you're here, that's why we're here. We're on this mission to help democratize this. And what's really important for that journey together is insights that we consistently get together. We leverage a lot of the insights that we learn from you in the form of 3 ways. 1, technology usage and adoption. 2, new use cases and processes associated with leveraging machine data. And 3, the fact that more and more roles and users across our core user base is expanding in our vision to democratize and give access, ubiquitous access to all. So let's take a look at those 3. First and foremost, starting with the technology trends we're seeing. For those who are not familiar, late last year in November, we actually put out the industry's first modern application report. And this report really started to analyze a lot of the metadata that we're ingesting every single day to understand patterns in that data, to understand what technologies are being used, what technologies are being retired. So a lot of that data actually came from analysis of usage on AWS. Recently, we've evolved that, and we have even a more comprehensive study that we're about to share with you. So what have we found in this report? First, the stack is changing. At the core essence of infrastructure, it's all about public cloud infrastructure now. It's very obvious. Things like EC2, S3 are common nature, and things around Windows and Linux and other operating systems are actually changing the way applications are architected because the next layer up is fundamentally changing as well. No longer is it simple 3-tier apps, as I mentioned before. It's not even about VMs anymore. It's about containers. It's not just about Docker. It's about Kubernetes and orchestration. Then it has impact in terms of what's running in those containers. Now it's moving from traditional databases to other in-memory type of stuff. And as I look at this whole stack, what's often really interesting to see is there's disruption happening at every single layer. And that actually drives more complexity and more opportunity for us to continue to work together to address this mission. The thing that's interesting from our findings here in the report that we put out yesterday, first and foremost starts with the operating system. Probably not a surprise to you, but in AWS, the preferred OS is, guess what? Linux. Over 80% of the customers running workloads in AWS use Linux. And surprisingly, we've seen a massive shift in Azure as well and coming on with Google. In the Azure case, we've seen Linux growth more than double over the last year. So you might say, okay, that's not too surprising. But what is surprising that's associated with that is there's a massive shift that's happening. Docker has actually more than doubled in the last year from development to production in terms of usage. We've seen unprecedented growth there in containers, let alone with orchestration, things like Kubernetes. And last but definitely not least, Lambda is more than double-digit growth in usage in the serverless computing. So as we see these things take place, it actually starts to give us insights into other pieces. And that is really around the fact that legacy vendors, legacy technologies, particularly with respect to databases, are done. They're being left behind. Developers are voting with their feet. They want simpler, faster, scalable, in-memory type of technologies to be able to help power their modern applications they're building and running. No surprise, probably, but what's interesting is it's not just about the in-memory technologies and databases, but the choice of web servers are fundamentally changing as well. In this case, what we've seen is that with Nginx and Apache, the growth has been astonishing, not just in AWS, but also in Azure. The thing that we find here that's also very interesting and surprisingly, and some advice we have for you, our users, and our community, is that security is still in the dark. Unfortunately, a lot of our customers, a lot of our prospects, a lot of the industry is still struggling with this aspect. Why is that? Most companies are in this divide. They're straddling the line between the legacy on-prem world, where the SIEM technologies are dead, useless, and not providing value, to this new world where modern applications are being architected and migrated and now need the same, if not improved levels of security, but it's just not yet there. So what are we doing about it? I'll talk more about this, but the first thing we're trying to make sure you understand is that the new way of actually addressing this is start to leverage some of the common services that are available to you in the AWS platforms as well as the other platforms provided. In this particular case, what we've seen is from all of our users, all of our workloads on AWS, only 50% of you are actually using things like CloudTrail. That's a big no-no. We as an industry need to do better together. So we are obviously doing our part to make sure we support these new security services out of the box, but we're also making sure that we provide that guidance, to be that coach, that mentor, that confidant for you to make sure that you're leveraging some of these capabilities that you should be, that you're not. So as we look at the technology usage, there's also an interesting piece here, and that is around the use cases. The use cases of democratizing machine data. And so we've learned a lot from your usage, from people in the roles that they're interacting with their Sumo service, and we've gained some insights there as well. Well, not too dissimilar to how we started over 7.5 years ago, many of you start with Sumo to understand security intelligence, to get your hands around not only the infrastructure, but to really start to, and unfortunately in those crit-sit situations, do security forensics. Look back over a long period of time, short period of time, to understand what's happened, what's caused that breach, what's caused that risk or vulnerability that we're exposed to at an endpoint or server or somewhere in the architecture. So what we see very clearly is that infrastructure, performance troubleshooting, security forensics is one of the common things that a lot of our users first start with respect to security. Second piece for us, in the massive amount of data growth now, has been driven by what? Application intelligence. Like I mentioned a little bit earlier, because driven by the modern application architectures that are greenfield in public cloud, and secondly, followed by those that are being lifted and shifted and migrated to the public cloud, are reasons why new instrumentation, new analysis, and new insights are being powered by Sumo and your usage of Sumo. Third piece that we see is astonishing as well. This has the fastest amount of growth that we're surprised by. But it's not too surprising given how much we've seen you guys start to use Sumo in different ways. We're daily and weekly astonished and amazed by the different use cases that you bring forward to us to be able to leverage Sumo for. In this case, when we say service intelligence, it's a lot around how you're looking at cross-cloud sources, but more importantly, looking at revenue-generating services to gain insights. So customer success, customer support, business-relevant KPIs, things around support and retention, kind of like we use our own Sumo data to understand what's going on with respect to our customers, our usage, as well as revenue forecasting based on usage. But that's actually led its way to now IoT and connected devices use cases. Customers like iRobot and others who are trying to get that telemetry from those vacuums, feed that back up to understand service quality. We're just scratching the surface here with respect to service intelligence, and we would love for you guys to keep pushing the envelope, find new ways to use this platform to be able to address those use cases and share it with not just us, but the rest of you in this community. So as we think about the use cases, it's obvious to us that there's something else happening here. The democratization is here, now. The roles are fundamentally changing. Before we had siloed teams for development, operations, security. Now we're seeing the formation and collaboration of a unified team. Believe it or not, I've walked into some customer shops and they have teams called DevSecOps. Not too surprising, because these teams are having to be forced to work together, whereas before they were forced to be siloed. They're actually wanting to come together because they see the power and the enrichment that they can get from collaborating from the insights from a platform like Sumo. So while 70% of our usage comes from development, DevOps, SecOps, DevSecOps, ITOps, what's also really interesting in this is that 30% of it starts to come from tangential groups that are being driven and powered by this core center set of users. We're starting to see customer support teams, success teams, not too dissimilar to how Sumo uses this internally, to understand things like SLAs, to understand usage patterns, and in some cases, loyalty services and applications and activations. We're starting to see usage outside of tech organizations and technical people in the lines of business, starting to understand business revenue generating services. We have some customers that are monitoring transactions for their website. They're looking at KPIs to look at when they do pushes and changes, what the implication that is to traffic and users and therefore dollars. We're starting to see finance teams, accounting teams, and product teams start to use it to look at how the business is doing. Not too dissimilar that Sumo uses Sumo internally. And last but definitely not least, many folks in marketing, sales combined that are using it to get insights around activations, behavior, and the like. So while the usage is massive, while the democratization is happening, what's also interesting is how other customers are using this. And I'm amazed at this every single day. And as I mentioned a little bit earlier, how different groups across different use cases start to use Sumo, and how the word starts to spread, and how the teams start to come together within organizations to communicate and collaborate, I thought I'd share a few of those examples before you hear from a few of our customers. One example that comes to mind is Pinterest. Probably most of you are familiar with Pinterest. We started similar to Airbnb with a simple need, an audit, PCI audit need. When the security team brought us in, they had dashboards up on the NOC and consoles. The development team started to realize, wow, what's that all about? And they hadn't even known or aware of Sumo. And soon thereafter, they realized, why am I managing this horrific open source Elastic stack that I got to put more and more people at it and try to scale and drive the cost down when I can't, when I can just use this service and I can get the Elastic scale, but more importantly, a lot more features, and I can focus on what I do best. So quickly, the security team introduced us to the DevOps team, and now the DevOps team is using us for telemetry and troubleshooting and monitoring. That's not too dissimilar to what we've happened at Marriott. We started with Marriott with the development team and operations because it was the web-facing properties, and then naturally the security team got wind of it, they started using it, now they're collaborating. Same thing happened with SmartThings, Samsung. The DevOps team started using it, now customer success and support and security, so it starts to go viral. We've seen the same thing in Airbnb. Another example, Anheuser-Busch. We started with them with respect to security. They were going through a massive transformation, and they still are. They're consolidating data centers. They're re-architecting their stacks. They're moving to the cloud. They're going through mergers and acquisitions. Everything's constantly changing. They need to be a digital business. They realize that. So security brought us in to transform. Now what's happening is other groups in development, operations, and DevOps teams are starting to use us for the new modern apps, all built on a microservices-based architecture and leveraging not just Sumo, but containers and different types of core technologies below that to be able to analyze and run those modern applications. So the list goes on in terms of various examples. And I know that today you're going to hear from other customers throughout the day in terms of presentations, but I also encourage you while you're here together, come together, talk to each other, find out how you're using Sumo, find out other ways that you can share and leverage from each other, exchange information, be able to start to collaborate and communicate outside of this conference so that you can help us and we can help you power this community and continue to propel us forward. So now, I want to take a pause and actually have you hear from a few of our customers. One from Hearst, and we're going to start with a short video from Pauly, who's the head of DevOps, and how he and his team are using the Sumo Logic platform to drive continuous intelligence for the analytics economy. Please run the video.
Hearst Business Media is predominantly large data, dealing with finance, automotive, and healthcare. It's really become a data-based company, which is really where companies like Sumo Logic and others really help us out as far as managing and getting value out of that data. As we continue to store more and more data, we really want to be able to perceive the same value. In fact, that value should increase as the data increases, but we don't see that most of the time. It's a large problem, and it's only getting worse, right, as we continue to throw more data at cheaper and cheaper storage solutions. We don't see the value increasing commensurate with the amount of data. The issue around who has access to the data. And I call this kind of a people funnel. Traditionally, you have a lot of inputs coming in from people, process, and tools. But that funnel gets narrower and narrower until it gets to the bottom, and you have one or two sort of caped heroes that have access to the data. Or maybe you even have an entire team. But what you should have is everyone having access to that data. What Sumo Logic does, it's great for us and it's great for I think anyone that uses the product, is it opens that funnel up in such a way that everyone has access to the value the data provides. One thing that Sumo Logic does, especially with creating dashboards and making the language and the UI so easy to use and consume, is that now everyone can get access to that data, whether you're in support, whether you're in QA, whether you're in sales or a product owner. Our product owners have started using Sumo Logic to really look at usage statistics and data around the overall application. You know, before they had to ask this team for, this individual for, and that person would have to run off. And what you did was you built an artificial queue behind the data. What we want is instant access to that data. Sumo Logic has been wonderful for that because we're able to see across all the systems simultaneously and in real time. That's been phenomenal. You know, the service level from Sumo Logic has been just well above expectations.
So now that we've heard from Pauly, it gives me great pleasure to invite a friend, a colleague, and probably one of the industry's most progressive, forward-leaning CISOs that I know, David Hahn, to join me on stage and talk about his experience around the continuous intelligence journey on the security side of Hearst. David?
Good morning, good morning. Wow, so Pauly, you know, he's on the business side. He gets a cool video, so I'm the security guy, right? So I just have to come up and make it up. So let me see what I can do. All right, so where am I? Orchestration. So yeah, I'm gonna talk about kind of our journey. We've been on Sumo for about 3 years now. And you know, in terms of what we've been able to do, leverage it, how it's growing, and certainly kind of what you're all interested in, where are we going next after that. So let me first start with who we are. So I think most of you probably heard of our brands. So probably the closest one here is we own the San Francisco Chronicle, you know, just up the street there. And then various TV stations, various magazines, Cosmopolitan, Elle, a lot of women's magazines. So we also are very big on the media side. We own parts of ESPN. We own parts of A&E, History Channel, a lot of that. And then what Pauly was just talking about here is our business media side. So we look at media as another content and a data-driven company. And then if you look at our other stacks, we're in financials. We own Fitch Ratings. which is like S&P and Moody's, so it's another kind of content type of thing that you're trying to protect data. We have an automotive business. We actually have an aeronautic business as well. And then we got a lot of healthcare. So I'm dealing with trying to figure out how to protect all that EPHI data. So we've got PCI, all those things as well. So the reason for this is really to show you that there's this broad range and this elastic discussion that Ramin brought up, which is how the heck do I protect all of this across? I need to have probably like 200 security analysts. I don't, okay? And they're never going to give me that. So how do I do that? Well, that's all this journey that we've been talking about here in data, okay? So let me go next. So this is not meant to be an engineering exercise, but we just want to show you a little visual that how we're trying to connect everything together. So we started off with what we can start ingesting into Sumo. And then again, we spent literally the first couple years like, okay, let's grab some of that, let's grab some of that, going through. And then really now we've built an ecosystem in terms of what we need to put in there. We're doing something like 850 something gigs a day, and it's just going to keep growing. So what we got to now do is make sure that it's in an automated manner. We cannot afford to, again, keep adding more people. That's just not going to occur. And they're just going to keep buying more companies. And again, so we're not going to slow down. And the expectation for me is to be able to plateau, maintain that, and then go deeper, do better. So we built a lot of the automation with ServiceNow, with Tenable. If you think about all the different pieces, we're working with CrowdStrike, we've got Proofpoint, we've got Office 365. I mean, it doesn't stop. And if you start looking at more and more of what all companies now are doing, which is going to the cloud, going to SaaS, you no longer have systems, applications inside of your data center. There is no data center. So how do I now figure out all our employees who are going over to Dropbox, who's going over to Salesforce? How do I collect all that data, right? How is it going to go to that? When they go to Amazon, that's great. I go to CloudTrail, right? So that's an easy thing to do. But there's more and more that we got to start capturing. So this has to be continuous. And guess what? I don't want to build all this, okay? I don't want to. So Ramin, help me build some of these things. But really the questions to the rest of you guys, okay? We're all trying to do the same thing, right? And so why is this not open? Why is this not shareable? Why are we all doing and building everything by ourselves? And this is a network effects community we have to maintain and grow and even further. Okay, so again, this is just the visuals there. So in terms of what are the key things that we're looking for? So we want to go deeper. We want to get into NetFlow data. We want to be able to understand what's happening in our network. And once you start getting there, the human eye cannot figure this thing out. We absolutely have to have the machine intelligence to be able to tell us what's an anomaly, what are the strange things that are going on, what's kind of under the covers of what's happening there. We need to be able to orchestrate all this because, again, my staff is small, and it's never going to grow to the size of the amount of data that we're handling. So we have to be able to automate that. We have to be able to orchestrate the work to be able to manage it. The case management is an important aspect of it as well because we cannot do it the traditional way where, OK, you get an alert, let's start investigating it, let's start collecting all the data, let's look at the logs. The typical person may take 3 days to investigate. We can't afford to do that anymore. Okay? And so again, this automation layer that we're constantly trying to build and move on is going to give us that capability. And eventually, yes, it also gets to the point that even our so-called security analysts are doing their job totally differently. The kind of first and second layer, the traditional SOC, really will be moved out. And really, you get to a much more of a specialist type of firm and somebody that we call a threat hunter, somebody who needs to proactively be looking inside of a network, just like a bad guy would be, and trying to figure out what is going on, what are the things that's happening there. So that's what I call shifting security from being a reactive, which is somebody's attacking you, I need to now respond. That's what fire departments are. They come after the fire has already started. To be more proactive and saying, I can see what's going on here, and I'm going to stop this thing, or I'm going to control this thing before it spreads. So that's the idea behind this. So what are the key things? So what are we doing? We feel like we have to be able to determine what our platform is, right? But I call it being agnostic, because to some degree, as much as I love Ramin, I don't care. Okay? And what I mean by that is the sense that it's everything that you're building to it. So clearly, your platform has to give you the capability to do that. But once it does, then you have to let that thing grow. And so the network effects is the key there. So again, I don't want to build all these things. I also don't know all these things, right? The bad guys really are well connected and they work together because money is at hand, right? So there's a lot of things that they do. How come we don't work together, Okay? I mean, other than coming to conferences and having a couple of beers, we don't share any of this thing. Why? Well, it's not easy. The lawyers get involved and like, okay, everybody can. This has got to change, right? So if you think about it in terms of, any kind of platform, iTunes, whatever you look at, right? The ability for them to exponentially grow that had to do with allowing the users to take advantage of it and then sharing it together. We need to do that. So I keep encouraging Ramin all the time, give us the ability to do it. And I don't care if it came from Joe or Mary or Sue, I don't care. Okay, I want to know that intelligence that they're getting. I want to know this new rule that they've come up with, whatever those things are, to be able to take advantage of it. And I don't care who's behind it. And so I'll share my stuff too. And you don't need to know that came from Hearst. You don't need to know there was a certain kind of security threat that impacted us. Well, that's the part that clearly the lawyers, nobody wants to share that. You don't want that stuff to come out. You don't want your dirty laundry. Okay? But in terms of having learned from it, if one of us has gotten attacked, why can't the rest of us benefit from that? Because the next time, it could be you, right? We have to enable that, and that's what I mean by network effects. The other key thing that is definitely a challenge is who do you have on your staff? Traditionally, for security, again, we have a lot of folks who have a network background, who may have some application background, who understand some of these things. It's now different. The people who need to start building these things together, okay, the data scientists, the developer, whatever you call them now anymore, right? I don't even know what that are. And then your kids, when they grow up, going like that, their jobs, we don't even know what that's going to be, right? And really, that's the part that also makes it challenging. So I'm always looking for help. And I'll get it from anybody, whether it's a partner or a vendor or anybody. We need to start having more and more of these, services or people available so that we can tap into it. So that's what we got to tap into each of us together, because there's stuff that each of you are building that's going to be interesting to somebody else, right? And so the more we can do it, the better. We talked about the scaling across, and we're going to be on Amazon. We're also going to be on Azure. We're already on Google. That's just the way it is. Okay? It's not a better or worse. That's the way. So how do we basically manage all that? I talked about the shadow IT piece, right? Which is we are no longer in any one place. It's so spread out. Okay? So at Hearst right now, we're in the middle of a brand new finance system. We're going to Oracle. We're brand new payroll system, going to ADP. Every one of those things are in the cloud. Okay? It is totally changing in terms of how you interact, how the employees work, okay, where the data is, and then how I need to change the security model. So my ability to get the data and then switch that around, I got to do it quickly. I got to do it fast. Okay? Now, I also don't get into the build or buy. Okay? Yes, we could build it. Great. If you could buy it, do it. Why would you sit there all day trying to build something else, right? So my belief is that you got to take advantage of all those capabilities. Don't get religion on me, okay? Go ahead and figure out, and if somebody over here has already built it, give it to me, okay? Let's share it, okay? That's the mentality we got to have. Yeah, so it's basically going to be a hybrid model as we continue to build our way through, and then we're going to reach a certain point that says you're going to have to do it all, continuously do it again, okay? And that's the beauty as well as the challenge behind all this. And then I was talking about the whole being proactive instead of being the reactive model. Yeah, once we start getting the machine intelligence to then point to the type of things that we're looking for, not just anomalies for the sake of anomalies, right? But based on a set of patterns, based on a set of threats that we know about, that's what we want that threat hunter to be thinking constantly, but then they need the aid of something that could process and capture huge amounts, terabytes of data on a daily basis to then be able to say these things are good, right? So again, we got to get into that mode. Okay? And then we're constantly going to be shifting all the time there. So again, we're prepared for that, and we're ready for that journey. Okay? And then that's my speech. So thank you very much, Ramin.
Thank you. So the point is clear. We're here for a reason. We're here for a reason to share, to collaborate, to work together. I couldn't have said it better than David. And what's interesting about the story of Hearst is there's so many different businesses, some that are transforming and moving to the cloud, some that are already in the cloud. And the fascinating thing here is you're seeing, despite the massive size of all the various businesses, that these teams are actually coming together, voting with their feet, starting to share the insights. And now over 10 different groups, at least within Hearst, in different parts of the organization, are doing terabytes a day on Sumo to be able to better understand the infrastructure, applications, users, and obviously security. So now that we've heard from a company that's in the transformation for a lot of their digital properties, they have some traditional, let's shift gears a little bit and actually hear from another customer, not too dissimilar to us, who's been born and bred in the cloud. And it's my privilege and honor to invite someone who's been very close to Sumo from early on, and the customer who's been great, not just a great advocate, but a superb partner in helping us develop our own capabilities and strategy. It gives me great pleasure to introduce Chris Stone, Chief Product Officer of Acquia. Chris? Knock him dead. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Ramin. Sorry to hear about your crappy baseball team. And you have a crappy football team. Should I stop? As you can, I'm from Boston. We have parades. It's pronounced Acquia. We built a site for the city of Boston, boston.gov, which was a complete, roughly $1 million revamp of the entire city's how you pay your taxes and garbage collection. I'll never forget, we stood at the ceremony announcing the site, and he called it Acquia, and I thought, he was going to get a bottle of water. At least he thought he was going to get a bottle of water. Anyways, let's talk about who are these guys. Well, first, as Ramin said, we were born in the cloud. We started building a PaaS, or a platform as a service, on top of AWS when only two services were available, EC2 and S3 buckets. That's it. That's all that was out there. So we built an environment from scratch. This was 8+ years ago. At this point now, we're one of AWS's largest ISVs, on the order of close to 20,000 instances across the world in 10 zones, or 10 regions and multiple zones. It's been quite an exercise in learning how to build a completely distributed, elastic environment. We now support roughly 22 different AWS services underneath the covers of our environment. Our goal is to never know you're running on a particular public cloud. To us, it's a utility. You shouldn't have to know. It's amazing to me, these battles, fights, and arguments over, do you run in Azure, or do you run in AWS or Google? Who cares? The real aspect for us, or the real challenge for us, is to make sure we build an environment for the customer and solve the problem, not choose the utility. So we have roughly 800 employees. We're just a little under a couple $100 million in revenue, and we've been able to achieve that over the past 8 years. So there's a challenge to Sumo. We're headquartered in Boston, located around 15 areas across the world in 7 different countries. Sumo usage. If you look at the end of this slide right here, our expected Sumo use in 2018 is to be 2 to 3 times what we use today. I know Ramin and Bruno, and I can hear them going cha-ching. That usage is based primarily around the notion of digital experiences, and I'll get into that in a minute. It isn't just about PHP-built websites. It's about the expansion and the orchestration of just about every omni-channel, I hate that word, but every omni-channel thing you can think of being supported. And think of the amount of data and content that's being captured and driven by the expansion of the usage of these devices. And that's what we predict is going to drive that kind of growth. So we're ingesting around 1 terabyte a day. We try to parse out as much as we possibly can versus just store it and push to Sumo servers. We expect this is our current plan size. We expect that to grow, as I said, 2 to 3x over the next year. I have about 305 of my employees that are provisioned using Sumo on a daily basis, everywhere from doing security audits to our support and operations team, doing debugging, trend analysis, everything you can possibly imagine, and as well as looking for threats from, let's just call them problematic regions across the world, so that we can do some predictive analysis on what we think is going to happen. Many of our customers are government agencies across the world, so they actually have hired us to do that work for them. So that's our usage of Sumo. Not only do we look to parse the logs, but there's gold in those logs. And when I say there's gold in those logs, what I mean is when we talk about, when Ramin talks about continuous intelligence, to us, machine intelligence or machine learning is a key aspect for our product line as we go forward, and I'll talk more about that and how logging matters. Digital experiences. I don't know what a digital experience is. I've yet to have one. Maybe someday I will. I'm not a marketing guy, as you can tell. But what's important to me as an engineering lead and as a product person is trying to figure out how to solve the problem of integrating and orchestrating just about every IoT device you can possibly imagine. It used to be for us, let's build a PHP website using Drupal, our open source environment, open source content management system. Now, it's grown to be everything you can possibly imagine. It used to be about pulling information, now it's about pushing information. Everybody remember, anybody in here old enough to remember Pointcast? Right? Well, they were onto something 15 years ago or whenever it was. And so pushing data or pushing content to virtually any device and any system out there is becoming tantamount. And companies like us trying to solve, how do you orchestrate all this stuff? How do you create a journey across all of these environments, all of these experiences to make it look like a single experience? And that is a huge, huge challenge that many of our customers are coming to us for. So when you think about it, these interactions are becoming very, very personal. They're not just about B2B anymore, they're very personal, kind of like a business to one or a B2one environment. Sites and browsers are now becoming journeys. It's a massive scale effort for companies like us. So orchestrating content and data, logs are gold. It's amazing the amount of information that is kept in logs that people just don't understand how to get at and what to do with it. And that's this whole notion of a continuous intelligence that you guys keep talking about. So just to give you an idea, this is where we've been coming from. It's kind of fun to put up charts like the then and now. I was involved in the creation of this thing called Corba 23 years ago. That was the early days. I know some of you are laughing, shut up. That was sort of the early days of a web service. And it's amazing how far we've come, and sometimes it's amazing how far we haven't. And the challenge for us is to keep moving and pushing the envelope. So pull is another, which has been around forever, but that sort of refactoring of the web has now become contextually optimized experiences. I want to put things in context. I want to be able to type content, and a recommendation of the next word I should use should be available, or an image that may come from a library should be presented to me based on the context I'm in. That's machine learning. That's the ability to pull information out of a log or pull information from content or of a commerce engine if I left a shopping cart abandoned. What do I do with that? How do I convert that into money? Those are the things that we're trying to solve as a company and provide as a solution. Customers, just to give you an idea who we build a digital experience for on top of our platform. NASDAQ is a good example of that. All of their IR websites, roughly 3,000 of them, are all run on our platform. And once that all becomes, and we log it all, and all that information, think about NASDAQ and the security requirements coming from them. I don't know if you remember a few months back, what you don't want is an IR site hacked and somebody hacks a press release of an earnings announcement the next morning, or have an effect on how you change that earnings announcement. So you get the idea of how complex these customers can be from a security perspective. Nestle, we run all of Nestle's sites. So we built a product called Site Factory. We capture all of the information on Nestle's 50-odd brands across the world, from Kit Kat bars to diapers to whatever it may be. And then we are acting like their internal agency and putting together all of their sites. What do? They then are learning about the use from the middleman, if you will, right, from the wholesalers, et cetera, that use Nestle products, and they want to convert more of those middlemen, if you will, to buying more Nestle products. So they want to use personalization, and again, logging that information, pulling that information out of the content generation and out of the data is incredibly important to them as they start to think about their digital experiences. Whole Foods. I can't mention their name on a slide, but I can say it. Is anybody here from Whole Foods? We run Whole Foods. So that means Amazon or AWS is now a customer of ours. Finally. I'm sick of sending money to them all the time. Anyway, so we've now built, we're building out a Whole Foods environment where you walk down the shopping aisle and recipes. It's amazing how many people, what the data analysis Whole Foods has done is people don't have recipes when they walk into Whole Foods. They actually create it when they're walking down the aisle. I don't know, maybe you do that, but that's what they're discovering based on the analysis they're pulling out of their logs and out of their content from their sites. And last but not least, IBM. Yes, we run IBM.com. They don't know it's running on AWS. Don't tell them. And lastly, I'm going to get in big trouble when I get home. Anyway, Johnson & Johnson, last but not least, our last slide here. Johnson & Johnson, across all of their brands, same thing. Similar process as to Nestle. They have a massively large environment, massive scale, and they need a highly available environment. What J&J is now trying to do across all of their brands is manage all of their digital experiences, manage all of the consumer, business-to-business, commerce, information gathering, whether it be from content, from commerce data, or from logs, and turn that into a conversion exercise to create experiences and create money, if you will, for the different brands. So there's some examples of our customers and how they use us by using Sumo for continuous intelligence. Thanks.
That's pretty insightful. It's great to hear from our customers and fellow community users. So let's shift gears a little bit. Speaking of which, when I spend time on the field, on the road, talking to prospects and customers, it's something that's pretty interesting that I would like to share with you. There's a lot of confusion that's going on out there. As customers embark upon this massive transformation that's going on in terms of cloud, modern apps, and the role that machine data plays in helping build, run, and secure those modern applications, there unfortunately still is a lot of confusion. And actually, you heard some of the same comments that David Hahn had made in terms of why try to build it when you can buy it? Focus on your core competency. Focus on driving business relevant, value-add services. Chris Stone reiterated that. And many of you are here because of that same thing. But unfortunately, not everyone's seen the light. And unfortunately, not everyone is certain how to traverse this path and this road to be able to achieve this new era of analytics economy. So in conversations I have with a lot of customers and partners and prospects, there's a couple things that come up. How do I get there? And what are my options? Well, unfortunately, most companies cannot go down the path of building themselves. They don't have the plethora of resources and data scientists and infinite compute and 7.5+ years and thousands and thousands and thousands of man hours that we've put in to build a platform like this to do it themselves. Only a handful of companies might be able to do that. The second thing I see is, unfortunately, many of them try to cobble it together. Mixture of open source Frankenstein stacks to commercial stuff that are not integrated, that are siloed, that don't provide end-to-end visibility, and ultimately don't scale, ultimately are more costly, and ultimately end up being failed and ripped and replaced. The third thing, which is really unfortunate, is a lot of times people get fooled. And by that, what I mean is vendors cloud wash it. They take a traditional legacy, antiquated product, they'll host it for you, it doesn't scale, they charge you an arm and a leg, and they call it cloud. That's a managed service. That's not it. What's really important here is that you really need a single, ubiquitous, continuous intelligence platform that's designed, architected, built, delivered, and consumed as a service. So what does our platform look like? And I'll spare the gory details. I just tried to make sure we consolidate this down to a more digestible manner. At the end of the day, we spent years and years on some core capabilities. Yes, one aspect of it is how do we ingest all this massive amount of data and constantly evolve into new data sources and types? So we built ingest pipelines, whether it's APIs, collectors, other means to get data in. That's not the problem. We've also built many ways to be able to persist and store that data, collection. So we make sure that if a collector goes down, there's redundancy. You don't get that with open source stuff. You don't get that with other tools that are cobbled together. We put a massive amount of IP in the middle area. That is about how we persist and cache that data, how we distribute that data. And unfortunately, when some components in the service and cloud services go down, we still don't go down. We still retain that data because we have duplicate copies. We keep things in memory. We distribute it all over the place so that we can pull that data back in or start to analyze that, which gets me to the third layer. A lot of our IP, a lot of our patents are actually around some things that we like to call supervised and unsupervised learning, or machine learning. The ability to start to guide the user, start to understand the trends and patterns in that data, and start to provide insights in the form of UI, reports, alerts, and other means. That takes us to the consumption piece. A lot of our customers are asking for different ways to consume and interact with this data, and I'll talk more about that. Whether it's our UI, whether it's our API, to be able to expose the insights and richness out. And those are partners as well as users. Lastly is we're seeing a few use cases, all three which I've talked about already, and more coming. Help us continue to evolve this. Help us continue to build more sources and give us more feedback in terms of what we can do around insightful intelligence and analytics around the data you're using it for and the use cases. So we have a maniacal focus at Sumo. Every single day, doesn't matter your role, we're all committed to the cause. Our mission is very simple, to democratize machine data. Our vision is very simple, to provide a ubiquitous platform to help customers build, run, and secure modern applications. So how do we enable and fuel this analytics economy? And what are some core pillars of our strategy? One, cloud scale economics for machine data. Continue to provide ubiquitous access across all cloud platforms, as well as continue to drive down the cost and increase the value. We spent a lot of time thinking about that, and we'll talk more about that today. The second piece is provide the only platform still that really brings together and unifies this rich set of structured, unstructured, and semi-structured data in the form of logs, events, metrics, telemetry into one platform to be able to analyze it. And third, but definitely not least, don't restrict access. Have ubiquitous access and allow proliferation of users across all roles, all geographies, to be able to not just get insights, but communicate and collaborate together. So let's talk about these three things in a little bit more detail. And I'd like to talk first and foremost about what we're hearing from you. Let's start with cloud scale economics for machine data. The first area of feedback I often hear in our teams here is help us continue to improve the value with our application and cloud efforts. Guide us, tell us what service to use, which ones are ready, which ones are not. What are some best practices and tips and tricks in terms of using common services on AWS? DevOps tool chain vendors and which ones you should use and consolidate to, right? Leverage the power of the multi-tenant platform, the Elastic platform, the multi-tenant platform you built to be able to provide more insights to us. We hear that time and time and time again. And I'll give you some insights of what we're doing. The second piece is not all data is equal. We need a different way to be able to consume, ingest, and analyze different types of data for different data sources and, more importantly, different use cases and different users. Provide us with a value-based consumption model that allows us to leverage the platform you built. Third, we want choice. As you heard from our last two speakers, as you've seen internally here, it's a hybrid world. That's the reality. We're still in this transition from a lot of the on-prem to the cloud, but it's going to be a hybrid public cloud, and it's going to be a heterogeneous world for a long time. Give us flexibility and choice. Support all those platforms that are out there, and make sure you have the ability to be able to help us migrate port as needed. So now that we've heard that feedback from you, what are we doing about it? First, continue our mission to make sure that we provide multi-cloud analytics. Today, obviously, we support all the services available for you on AWS, Microsoft Azure, Pivotal Cloud Foundry for your private cloud platforms, and as well as Heroku. I'm also excited to share that today we're announcing full support for GCP. For those who have been asking for GCP support, now you have a single platform with multi-cloud analytics that provides everything from GCE, Compute Engine, to all the other services that you've been asking for, out of the box into Sumo, available for you today to use, in addition to obviously AWS, Azure, and the like. So thank you to the engineering team, and thank you for our customers, design partners for being able to release this. So now that we provide the multi-cloud analytics, the next piece is remove the data tax. I've heard this a lot. Other vendors charge you for things like, I go over my limit per day, or they lock me out, or too many users and they shut off access. That's not cloud. That's not community. That's not us. That's not you. So what are we doing about it? Well, I'll talk about that in a second, but the other piece is there's also a different aspect, not just ubiquitous access to data, it's also correspondence to usage needs and business cycles. We have a lot of customers that are in gaming, and media, entertainment. They have retailers, e-tailers. They have different seasonality cycles. We have some customers that have spikes on Saturday and then drop off on Tuesday. Others that have end of quarter, certain times of years for sale. And so they need that elastic platform, they need that elastic consumption model, and they need to be able to provide users at different times of those cycles to be able to leverage these insights. So we've announced things like CloudFlex earlier this year, and before we get into CloudFlex, there's also another aspect of how pricing, licensing, and usage consumption works, because it stems with what? The data. A lot of you are actually telling us that you want to be able to ingest more and more of this data. And it starts with leveraging what you've started to build with Sumo in terms of collection, but also the fact that there's these open source stacks all over the place. You have Elasticsearch and Logstash, you have pieces of Graphite Grafana, you're using things like StatsD and CollectD. You want to be able to leverage that, integrate into Sumo, and be able to transition off those and have one single platform. So what we're announcing is now the ability to collect data from all those sources, evolve from things that we've done around syslog, Cloud syslog, and the like, to be able to support things like CollectD, StatD, FluentD, and the others, to be able to support the logs as well as the metrics into one single platform. Second thing we're doing for you is, as you're architecting and building your modern applications, instrumentation is one thing, but visibility in the process across the tool chain is another. So besides giving you insights to which tools we should use, a lot of you are saying, I'm standardizing on a certain source code control system. I need the ability to understand what's going on in my continuous build and release, and I need visibility into my artifacts and my binaries as it pertains to deployment, and I need visibility downstream with respect to operations and performance, and last, definitely not least, I need a holistic view across that life cycle. So what we've done is integrate things like GitHub to Jenkins to Artifactory to Bintray to downstream to New Relic, as well as provided our own monitoring to complement that to give you end-to-end visibility, full stack visibility, and one single consumed and delivered service. The third piece around that is, while we're providing more ingestion, providing more lifecycle support, there's another thing that's really important. Continue to evolve the analytics. Continue to provide insights that start to bring this rich data sets together. So we've talked a lot about logs and events, talked a lot about telemetry and metrics. Now start to analyze that together and start to look at that patterns and predict going forward, not just for operational issues, but also for security and threat issues. We'll talk about that a little bit more as well. So with respect to unification of data, therefore, we've talked about the open source. We've talked about the ability to ingest all these different data sources. What's driving that? Well, very simply, the consumption driven by things like containers, orchestration tools, are driving more data needs and more ingestion needs, and more telemetry from those protocols that I mentioned earlier that your developers, and many of the developers are using, like StatsD and CollectD, to be able to instrument their applications, to be able to trace and monitor those things. So in addition to what we're doing for monitoring with respect to protocols, instrumentation, we've also started to extend those capabilities, and very soon you'll see some capabilities around tracing from us to be able to monitor and troubleshoot the distributed workloads and API calls across your stack. So it's actually work in progress. We'd love for you guys to help us continue to evolve that. Check with us to be able to give some feedback, and we look forward to enhancing that and releasing it soon. Related to microservices, though, however, not just around tracing, but we're seeing that adoption, like I mentioned earlier, in terms of the shift from development and testing to production, and the Massive explosion with Docker in production, AWS and the like. That's also driven by the usage of Kubernetes. We're proud to announce today that actually we've updated our support for Docker, and today in the Docker catalog and actually the store, you have a new version of Sumo that supports the latest instrumentation capabilities and monitoring capabilities for Docker. So thank you for the development product teams for enhancing that, and congratulations to the Sumo users that gave us feedback. Okay, so we've talked about instrumentation and collection. We've talked about microservices and Docker and Kubernetes, and that's driving a lot of it. The other piece of this actually is security. Unfortunately, still, a lot of cases, this is an afterthought. And unfortunately, still, there's a lot of concern here with respect to what to do, how to do it, and what technologies and tools and vendors to use. So we obviously have a very pointed view here with respect to some of the challenges with the traditional tools that are out there. However, what we've heard from you is very clear. Make sure that you instrument and support a lot of the various capabilities that are out there, from endpoints to gateways and UBAs to things that we do for firewall and the like, right? So we're continuing to do that, as well as what we heard from you, improve the way that we actually start to investigate through workflow, through case management, for alerting and the like. You heard that from David Hahn. He's been asking us and others to you. So we have some exciting opportunities, the things that we're working on to announce. First, it starts with actually threat intelligence. For those who are not familiar, we provided the first platform, true native platform in the market earlier this year that leverages embedded threat analytics and intelligence into the data that you're already using on Sumo for free. So if you're not familiar with this, you should be familiar with this. You should try it. What is important is because we simply take a lot of the complexity out of the problem for you. What do? We're collecting all these things like IP addresses, email addresses, MAC addresses, and the like. The list goes on and on. We take all that information, we do a simple lookup, and we give you a consolidated list of IOCs or indicators of compromise. Why? Signal to noise, right? We're trying to improve that to allow the threat hunting process, the investigation process, and more importantly, the few security operations and analyst folks you have to focus on the right things. And that's what a powerful platform like this can do with embedded threat intelligence. So you haven't already tried it, you should. You get it for free. It's part of the platform. The third piece, platform is only as useful as the users in the community and the partners that build into it and on top of it. So we have an ambitious mission here to be able to provide this ubiquitous platform. And we need your help, and we obviously we've heard a lot of feedback from you in terms of what we need to do to continue to improve that. First and foremost, it starts with enable users across various functional teams. Don't limit the usage. Allow for us to share information, share dashboards, share access, and don't constrain that. Second thing we've heard from you, foster the community. Allow us to come together. Allow us to learn. Allow us to train. Allow us to leverage partners in the ecosystem. Allow us to communicate and collaborate in different ways, inside the product, outside the product, and online and digital means. And the last thing we've heard from you is enable our security needs. Help us and guide us with what we need to do with respect to security in the cloud. Help us understand what trends, what information, what insights you have to better inform us and to better secure us. So what are we doing about it? First, enabling users and powerful users. The thing we've really worked on is starting to remove a lot of the complexity with respect to how we onboard people, how we train people, how we provide access to dashboards and content that you've created. But first, it starts with training. One of the things you guys asked us for over the last couple of years is help us understand how best to use Sumo and where our knowledge is with respect to others. So we've spent enormous amount of time investing in modules for you to understand how to use the best practices and tips and tricks, convert that into training and certification, as well as continue to evolve that. So we've introduced and released 2 of those modules, and I'm happy to say there's well north of 400 plus people over the last few days and couple weeks that have passed the training and certification process. So I want to take this moment to actually thank the many folks within Sumo that worked diligently over the last several months to make sure we could deliver this for you to be able to take advantage of it. Thank you. But it's not just about training and certification. That's really important for learning. It's also about communicating and collaborating. As part of our community strategy and part of our collaboration efforts, you've asked for some simple things. So we started to use our strategy around community to be able to allow you to communicate through general discussions and chats, be able to use things like open Slack channel. And these are just a few of the aspects that we're enabling in addition to things in product that are coming, so you guys can ask questions, inform each other, and get guidance and share and collaborate. And there's more to come here as we look forward. So that's about community empowering users. The second is API first. Provide APIs throughout the stack for configuration, for automation. You heard it from David Hahn, you've heard it from other customers. Allow APIs to configure and provision users. Allow APIs to configure endpoints and collections. Allow APIs to get data out. Some of those are available and more are coming to be able to provide that for you. And last but definitely not least, RBAC. Many of you have talked to me, talked to our product teams, talked to our sales teams. I'm looking at a few of the customers here, I recognize that. Fine-grained, coarse-grained access control. And there's a few things that are really critical here that we're doing to support that. First, it's around content sharing. A lot of folks have been building dashboards. We have personas oriented towards how you guys are using our platform and product and how you're sharing that information in the form of dashboards. So the first area we built and now is in beta is the ability to decide either for a single person, a part of the organization, or the entire world, how you can share insights from the Sumo dashboard within Sumo. The second piece is around content sharing. We've worked long and hard on this to get it right because there's various dials that customers want to be able to have coarse-grained and fine-grained access control here. You want to be able to share content. You want to be able to allow them to edit. You want them to be able to view only but not edit. I'm proud to say that this is already in beta. It's being used, and you can expect it released very soon. So we've listened to you. We've heard from you. Many of you helped design this, and we're really proud that it's right around the corner coming to help enable the further communication and collaboration within your organizations and soon even outside of your organizations. So to summarize, our Sumo strategy. How do we fuel the analytics economy? 3 things. Continue to have a maniacal focus on cloud scale economics for machine data, providing flexibility and choice in where and how you run those infrastructures and workloads. Second is continue to provide a ubiquitous platform that unifies data, structured, semi-structured, unstructured, with unified analytics. And last but definitely not least, provide access to not few, but the all masses. Therefore, ubiquitous access. So in summary, before we shift gears and bring up the next speaker, what's our commitment to you? And as I reflected on this piece today, and as I reflected on why we're here, it reminded me of something that's the core essence of Sumo. And almost 3 years ago when I joined Sumo Logic, the thing that was surprising to me is the maniacal focus that I saw then and I continue to see now around some core values with respect to our commitment and our consistent passion to be in it with our customers. The second piece that's very exciting to see is that part of the reason why we're here is that everyone in Sumo and everyone in this room and online is committed to the same cause. Bring machine data out of the dark ages into the light. In fact, that's one of our core values. Bring light to darkness, or illuminate. And that's the whole theme of this conference. So I commit to you, and on behalf of everyone here at Sumo, that not only are we just committed to bringing light to dark, continue to innovate and stay ahead to deliver more value-added services, but you'll continue to see us have a maniacal focus to put you first and make sure that we're not just a vendor, we're not just a partner, but we're a trusted advisor. Thank you very much for everything you've done to make this day possible, and this is just the beginning of our journey together. So congratulations to all of you who've attended today. Congratulations to all of you who've done the certifications, and I look for many more of these conferences going forward. So without further ado, I'm humbly honored and proud to introduce our next speaker, an industry icon, co-founder of LinkedIn, partner at Greylock, and much, much, much more. Actually, very humble human being and someone that we can learn a lot from, Reid Hoffman.
Great to see you.
Okay, let's put Reid in the
I'm here and then, right, so
Come on over, Ramin.
you're over here.
I'm over
No,
there.
no, you're right there. Come
Oh,
on,
here?
just move your chair over.
Okay.
You seem so far away.
Coordination.
Okay, a lot of content over the last hour and a half or so. Reid, thank you for being here at our inaugural user conference. It's very exciting.
I wouldn't have missed it.
Great. So, why are you here at Illuminate? Tell us a little bit about your history with Sumo.
So one of the things that I focused personally more on the consumer side. So in Greylock, we kind of invest in enterprise and consumer. But one of the talks that I gave at South by Southwest some number of years ago, just as I actually was listening to your presentation, which I thought was great, I was reflecting on the fact that I had described Web 3.0 as data as a platform.
Yeah.
Because what's actually changing and transforming across all industry, and a lot of the times right now it's described in the news as artificial intelligence, but really what that artificial intelligence is essentially data with machine learning algorithms. And without the actual depth of data, there is no AI. And the reason why you think about like Web 3.0 as a kind of as a data platform is the function of essentially what are the new applications that really revolutionize our world. And the theory, which I still hold to, right, is that it comes from data. And so when the enterprise group said, hey, actually, in fact, the right way to do this is to think about building a cloud platform, because a cloud platform accelerates speed. We've got these great technologists. We have a lead on building this in the market. Should we do this? Part of what we do at Greylock is we vote between 1 and 4 on, like, would we do a deal? And part of the vote for is, if you don't do it, I'd do it. So I was a vote for on Sumo. So that's why I'm here.
All right, awesome. And you've been a lot of places lately. When we confirmed that you were here, I started looking at the schedule of activities, and I said, okay, you need to be in New York with Trevor Noah. You got to get back to Burlingame for Sumo Logic. You're on the Today Show. You're talking a lot about artificial intelligence. So we just heard a lot about the analytics economy. What's the role of artificial intelligence, and maybe go deeper on AI and machine learning within the context of that?
So probably most of you know this, but the key advances actually have been mostly, the algorithms have been mostly the same over the last decade. There's been some interesting advances, but the key thing is actually depth of computational processing in the cloud and access to data. And that's essentially what's transforming almost every industry. Because as is clear from a Sumo perspective, because it's part of the illuminate the light into what's coming in the world, is essentially this stack of data processed in the cloud, which gives you enough depth of CPU, enough a way of applying the most current and modern algorithms in order to do classification systems, is ranging everything from the actual detailed progress we're seeing in autonomous vehicles to, if you had to pick a random radiologist or an appropriately trained machine learning, you'd actually pick the AI over the random radiologist. There's still radiologists who are better than the AIs, but it's a shrinking set. Now, obviously, you try to put it together. Human plus machine is the high performance that you want. To just about every industry, because part of the question is say, not only are the questions of how do I maneuver my business, but what are the new applications that are possible? So you'd think it's easy when you say, well, AI, it's currently classification algorithms, classifications based on training sets out of data. But like, take autonomous vehicles. Why is that a classification problem? What's a classification problem? If I know I want to get here, well, okay, do I turn left? Do I turn right? Do I change a lane? Do I speed up? Do I slow down? Those are all a set of classification problems that roll up into a macro goal. The same thing is happening in all the industries, right? Everything from business strategy and intelligence to what kinds of acceleration within everything from manufacturing to medicine. For example, I'll give you one more AI thing that's happening, which is because of the intersection with genetics within medicine, a bunch of drugs that had previously failed FDA approval are now being retried because if they can say, oh, actually, in fact, the really, like, for example, death, bad side effect, oh, that only happens in these, like, 3% of genetics, and it's massively beneficial on the other 70. Well, once you know that, well, then data allows you to do that decision. So all of these drugs that were already created to have essentially health benefits are now possible. And that's another area where it's genetic data, medical data, right, together with build a intense classifier, because by the way, genetic data, there's a lot of genetic data, et cetera. So anyway, those are all the places where I think data as the platform and artificial intelligence as the agent and the classifier are transforming our world.
Okay, so one of the things that Ramin and I and the folks at Sumo have talked a lot about is a misunderstanding around AI and machine learning, what it really is. It seems like the new moniker to kind of assign to anything. Can you just help us understand where you think the market is and what makes it go from a almost science fiction to, okay, we really understand what this thing is doing now?
Well, part of it is actually it's accelerating so fast that you have some people within the AI community that believe that we will actually create, kind of autonomous, highly functioning, maybe human level functioning robots in 20 or 30 years. Mm-hmm. And the question is, there's some acts of magic between here and there, and they're counting that those acts of magic happen. So, it's like, okay, they're smart people. But what we already see, for example, is let's take an area like, for example, do you think people should take advantage of the security built into the platform? Security, modern issues, cybersecurity. Already today, actually, in fact, image recognition is better by the machine than by people. Mm-hmm. And so that means you can go to image recognition as identity and authentication today, right? And so that can mean anything from how do you unlock keys in the cybersecurity thing to questions about, like, for example, if you say, well, how can we be a lot more safe in our airport transportation grid, going back to terrorism and everything else. Well, you say, well, you put cameras everywhere and you're running it and you're like, whoa, who's that person who's coming in? Those transform the kind of the nature, and that's today.
Wasn't that in Schwarzenegger's Total Recall, though? You walk
exactly.
through with the dog and the X-ray machine and all
but
of
this
that.
is precisely why I was using this as the science fiction example. It's like, wow, what's science fiction? Well, no, science fiction that was not that long ago is functional today.
Well, Schwarzenegger as a heavyweight in Hollywood was a pretty long time ago. But
Minority Report.
That's true.
That's more recent.
Absolutely.
Right. So,
Ramin, how are you thinking about machine learning, AI? What's your thought?
Well, I think Reed actually hit the nail on the head. I think it's a combination of supervised and unsupervised. For a long time, what we've been focused on is to use basic statistical algorithms to understand signal to noise and start to separate out the common versus the uncommon. But all along, we've been using also the thumbs up, thumbs down, or like or dislike kind of to help fine tune that. And there's a lot more work we still have to do there. But I think the interesting piece about this is evolving from statistical correlation and human comprehension, and how do you balance that, right? Because we're dealing with not just one type of data set anymore. We're dealing with such diverse data sets. And more importantly, the biggest data set that's cumbersome is unstructured in nature versus the structured nature. So find that right balance has been a challenge for us for 7.5 years, right? And I don't think we've fully cracked it, but I think we're doing a better job than most, if any, right? And a lot of our investment still is about how do we not just build new algorithms, but how do we start to actually hire a different profile of developers? So a lot of universities today now are starting to change their degrees and their programs, right? It's not just about computer science, it's about data science and computer science. And you're starting to get dual degrees. We're seeing that in Europe and Eastern Europe. You're seeing that in other universities. So that's going to be more and more of a shift of the profile or the cross-pollination. Mm-hmm. And you're only as good as your analysis engine, and you're only as good as your platform in terms of amount of data. So this is a constant struggle for us, but something that we've been maniacally focused on.
One thing I want to add to is part of the data as a platform speech for Web3 that I gave at South by Southwest was precisely the areas where the folks who will get the competitive advantage are integrating data off multiple sources, right? And it's both structured and unstructured. And so that combination, and this is actually part of the reason why we think that the cloud is the ultimate force for this, because similar to how modern AI has been unlocked once computation got in the cloud, because you can put in the data and you can do this, you need to have a lot of different sources in order to get that edge, which is the acceleration that is modern business.
So one last question on this. Right now, the AI conversation seems to be very polarized. They're going to take over the world. And then it quickly goes to, okay, let's just give everybody a check. You won't have to work anymore. To this is just going to enhance things. How quickly is it going to take for us to get away from that polarized sense and really start to kind of come together of a reality? What's the time frame for us to go from this dramatic conversation to, okay, we've kind of worked out the kinks and the drama, and now we're kind of applying ourselves?
You're on the record, so
Yes.
just to make sure.
I understand. So unfortunately, there isn't a simple answer to that question. Okay. And the reason is because what happens, look, if the current progress curve, which is in the definite upward swing of a J curve, continues on a J curve, whether it's towards like kind of human level artificial intelligence or other directions, people will still be going, where does that end? Where does that go? And you'll have that, some people going, oh my gosh, the robots are coming for us, and other people going, wow, we can all be essentially like living like we're in Hawaii all the time, right? And you'll get that discussion because of that. It will die down if you begin to get to S curves. All J curves ultimately get to S curves, and S curves go, oh, well, we understand what it is where it fits in, and so forth. And I'm not saying we want it to get to the S curve. There's a whole bunch of progress. My view on this is that just like any major technology, and you can actually look at synthetic biology currently, you can look at nuclear technology from 50, 60 years ago, all has amazing opportunities and amazing concerns together. And part of what leadership is steering us in the kind of right direction. And so I tend to kind of roll my eyes when utopians get up here and say, hey, the robot's going to do all the work and we're going to have one big happy society, kind of like Star Trek. And you're like, well, actually, in fact, people like to have a sense of meaning. They like to kind of have a place within their community and work. That transition won't suddenly be that we all head out to the beach, like the robots are doing all the work on Monday and Tuesday we're heading to the beach. And so the pure, like, simple utopian perspective is naive and dangerous. But similarly, oh my gosh, when the robots are here, they're going to not need humans except for maybe for pets, which is like kind of what's behind the other thing. And you're like, well, like for example, you're projecting all like your worst fears upon actually, in fact, how robots might be constructed. Because, for example, what will actually be their want structure? What will be the way that we can possibly build interesting symbiosis with them? Because, like, for example, on a slightly science fiction kind of optimistic note, if you said, well, what would robots really want? Well, robots really want actually, in fact, solar power, right? And like, for example, if I thought about like writing commissioning a science fiction thing, which is like, hey, we did this deal for the robots to really help us, and then we said, hey, you can live on these other planets that we can't live on, and let's work together. I mean, it's pretty easy that there's a way. It's like they don't need the carbon environment that we need here and so forth if you wanted to go into the sci-fi thing. So I think the simple negative sci-fi thing is also alarmist and dangerous. And so I think the answer for what we're doing is say, what are the key things that we think about in terms of building AI? We don't know if it'll get to this kind of alarmist thing. We do know it'll affect industries a lot, and that'll affect society, and we have to work on that for sure. And then let's make sure that we're doing the right things to maximize utopia to dystopia. And I'm very optimistic we can.
Okay, so a lot of the keynote was about every single industry being disrupted in technology in some way or form or fashion, and the role of digital experiences to connect people with their customers and their consumers or their supply chains. Last question on AI. What, and I know I've done 3 last questions on AI.
That was the jungle.
What industry do you think will be the most surprising to people that takes advantage of AI first? I want your thoughts also on that, Ramin. So which industry is going to surprise everybody in their application of AI for something that's really disruptive?
Can I duck and have you go first? No? All right, I'll go. I think that probably
The biggest surprise.
the biggest surprise will probably be robotic construction.
I swear to God, I was going to say the same thing.
Well,
No, only because I've lived and breathed this.
Yes,
It's
yes.
so manual intensive and costly
Yes.
and risk. I mean, it just.
Okay, so talk about it. Go ahead.
because by the way, one of the things when people talk about job displacement, which is a really serious issue, I'm actually going to give an address at the UN on Monday to kind of talk about these things amongst others. And everyone talks about like, okay, there was going to be a lot of displacing, like, take autonomous vehicles and drivers and so forth. There's going to be a lot of job displacement, and we do need to work on the society. But the thing they always forget is part of what we're trying to do in progress is actually drive down the cost of a lot of living, right? And so if you say, well, okay, so say I have flat wages for a year or 10 years, but my cost of living goes down by 40%. My actually quality of life has gone up. And when you look at where are the areas where the cost of living is going down dramatically, and where it's going up, construction's going up. Everybody, Maslow hierarchies of needs, we've had enormous reduction in food costs, so eating, right? Because we've done a huge amount of productivity there. I actually think we will do it in construction, and then that will actually, in fact, lead to a higher quality of life. And I think that's part of the future that we're trying to unlock, and that's part of the reason why I went there.
Cool.
Oh. Well, the only thing I can add to that then is if you look at the construction market in particular, there's a few areas that are ripe for disruption and change. First, it's materials, right? A lot is changing in terms of how homes, multi-unit, commercial are being fabricated today and prefabricated and delivered on site, right? It's no longer someone banging a hammer or a nail after the foundation's been poured. More and more is moving away from wood to steel framing and the like. The issue with that tends to happen in the labor piece because of how laborers move from job to job, inspections that are associated with that, and the list goes on and on. So if you can have a prefabbed set of materials show up at the right intervals and you have machinery fabricating it in addition to humans supervising it, you can dramatically shrink down the cost and time. Then you can start to shift to, okay, how do you make this more ubiquitous across high metropolitan areas to other areas so you can further drive down the cost.
All right, you heard it here first. Startups in AI in construction. Okay, let's shift gears. Podcasts. All of a sudden, these podcasts, well, not all of a sudden, but the last few years, they've really taken off. And you do a really high production masters of scale, going to a lot of people in the Valley and other places and asking them about things. I assume you're meeting with people and recording these podcasts with people that you spend a lot of time with. What are you learning in doing these podcasts about these people or about the issues that are going on? Because you've known these people for a while, but you're having conversations with them. What's new that's coming from this Masters of Scale podcast?
Well, there's two areas, so I'll go to the known and the unknown. So there are folks who I don't know that well that I have the honor and delight of interviewing, which then actually gives me lenses into other industries. Sarah Blakely of Spanx and other things, which is like, wow, that's how that industry works? That's really interesting. And she is a world-class entrepreneur.
Yeah.
And so there's a stack of things about like, where does grit and hustle play within kind of call it the entrepreneurial world of atoms versus bits? What are the kinds of things that you do in order to begin to get kind of customer attention? Other kinds of things that are basic to the entrepreneurial journey that I begin to learn the ways that one can do it super effectively that are outside the classic Silicon Valley playbook because we focus on software so much. Then within the folks that I know, maybe and there's for each of the interviews there's something. I'll probably take the funniest one was for me the kind of the little like whoa, yeah, that's smart and didn't know that was with Zuckerberg because someone had implanted in me because someone had told me like finally they've really learned and matured their business because they moved from they move fast and break things as a kind of core value to move fast with stable infrastructure. And that's the growing moment. And I was like, I kind of stuck in my head, and I was like, oh, yeah, I wonder how that was thought about and everything else. And so I was like, well, okay, I'll just ask Zuck this question. We're sitting down. I was like, so what was the change in your thinking that you moved from this to this? And he went, no change. I was like, what? Well, the words changed, right? And he's like, no. Look, the macro goal in what's important within modern business is moving fast, right? That's part of the reason why, part of the whole thing around continuous intelligence, the thing about having being on top of your data is so critical, is that speed of motion is, if you're not moving fast, you're probably on some death curve, so move fast. And he said, look, this is just two different calculations of how you move fast. When we're small, right, actually, in fact, the best way to move fast was to have a willingness to break things. When you're large, if you break things, the repair cost takes too long. So you have to say, move fast, but keep the infrastructure stable as you're doing it, because otherwise, if you break it, that slows you down. It's actually, in fact, the same principle applied at two different levels of scale within an organization whose still operational mandate is to move fast. And I was like, oh, of course that makes sense. Right.
And you got the sense from that interview that was absolutely how he'd been thinking about, very consistent, very steady.
Yes.
Any other surprises from any of these interviews where you said, gosh, I really thought that I knew that, and then I sat down and, because in some ways, preparing for this talk, you think a lot about, okay, I need to ask a question that nobody else asks. Because Zuckerberg is, everywhere. You're everywhere. So what is the things that you try to get to?
So actually, in fact, I don't necessarily go for what is totally new. I go for what magical insight does this person have, and then to try to get it in the most pure distilled way. If it happens to be something they've said 10 other times, fine. Most people actually haven't heard the 10 other times, right? So it's trying to say, what I try to do is say, look, across the different interviews in the podcast, like this is a piece of magic that is, as best as I get it, and as best as I get in the conversation, is a piece of magic that is good for the world to hear about how do we build these amazingly scaled companies. So another one, which I knew about but was in more detail, was like Brian Chesky interview at Airbnb, where he went in some depth, which you'll get in the one-on-one interview more than you'll get pieces of it in the episode interview, which is the high production, and both of them are amazing. And I say that with humility because the amazing piece of the highly produced thing is the production team. I just sit down and ask questions. Right? They produce the whole thing. They do a really great job. Was he started going through like what is starting with a 10-star design experience, which is a really good way of thinking aspirationally and at a high bar. And like I'd never heard him say this exact thing before, which was like, well, what would be an ideal travel experience? Like you land at SFO, what happens? And it's like, well, what happens is all of San Francisco has lined up along the road, right? The mayor is there to greet you when you get off the plane. They have a Pope-mobile as they're driving you into town, right? That would be the 10-star experience. Well, okay, we can't do that. Okay, what's the 9-star experience? And then working back to what's the high-star experience that you can do and you can do at scale. And I was like, okay, I knew about, because I'd participated in Airbnb design work, I'd known about the working back. I just hadn't started ever at the 10-star experience in the conversation. I was like, oh, interesting. Right, yep. So that's kind of thing.
That's a high bar.
That's a high bar.
Okay, I'm going to ask you this first, and then I'll come to you, Ramin. So, Masters of Scale, who do you wish was alive that you could put on Masters of Scale?
Oh, that's a long list.
Okay, two.
So,
who would you want?
Let's see. I'd say Thomas Edison, Alexander the Great, and Marie Curie.
Okay. Any high level on why those?
So,
just one line on each, maybe.
And by the way, I've never been asked this question before, so this is like I might have a different answer 15 minutes from now. Right. So you succeeded in the new question that
there you go.
That has never been
My
asked
work
before.
is done.
Right. So Alexander the Great actually, in fact, created an empire very early from a very small set of city-states, and kind of what was the set of thinking about how he built the cross. And by the way, you could also go, Genghis Khan, and you could go early Romans, but it's like in terms of trying to build a larger scale society, what was this kind of set of thinking and working within that? Of course, Alexander was tutored by Aristotle, so that's interesting too, right? And then Thomas Edison, obviously, when you go to, part of what we try to do in these tech companies is massive innovation. Well, I mean, Edison was like one of the early American great innovators across a wide variety of topics. And so what did building these new technologies, the scale, look like then? And then Marie Curie was kind of in the thing about against adversity. I mean, here's a woman back in when times were still super, look, we have sexism now as a problem, but even more so, and yet would actually focus on these are the changes that will change the world, and I will actually build my lab to do that, focusing on scale and a viewpoint of this creates science in a way that actually, in fact, will change the way our societies work.
Follow up on the Edison thing. In some of your podcasts, you talk about there's an idea and then just let that idea go. Get that idea out as many places as possible and then build the network and execute on that. Where do you consider Edison? Brilliant idea person or brilliant get that idea and get the execution of that?
Probably about halfway between. Right? No, but seriously, he was a very good executor, but he wasn't absent ideas.
Okay.
So you couldn't just say executor because he actually, in fact, came up with some idea. Right. But he was frequently, he sees an idea and then he builds it. Mm-hmm. So like if you actually had to say, okay, 10 is execution and 1 is ideas, maybe it's 6, okay. but it's still,
okay.
It's still in the fairway.
Ramin, you're doing Masters of Scale. Who are you going to put?
I don't know if I'd go that far back in history. I'd probably relate it to personal experience I had. I had the opportunity early on to work at Netscape, and there was a visionary there by the name of Mike Homer. And unfortunately, he left us too early. And he was onto something. He was onto something because I believe that he saw the world in it through a different lens in terms of the portals and the community. And he unfortunately he left us too early. I would have loved to sit down with him and figure that out a little bit more. But on the corresponding side, I think there's someone also similar to that was Jerry Yang. Right? I mean, if you look at...
He's still alive.
I know. I know he's still alive.
Just,
But another visionary that was very focused on a similar thing that we're very passionate about, giving access and data and being able to bring light to dark. So, I mean, I really relate to both of those folks. Hopefully we'll be able to see Jerry in his next act too.
By the way, so there is a forthcoming episode with Jerry Yang on Masters.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
You heard it here first. Okay, Reed.
It's a good choice.
One of the things we were talking about before was this is an analytics-oriented show, and everything is so data-driven right now. And we were talking about a show that I'd seen recently where some scientists in Antarctica were putting together telescopes, and they believed that if they create a lens as big as planet Earth, that they could see into a black hole. So they're trying to figure out how to connect their telescope with other telescopes to make a massive lens and go forward. So that's about imagination. We're talking about visionaries. What's the role of imagination in an analytics-oriented economy?
Well, so, and it's a very simple principle. You both need creative thinking, imagination, and data. People frequently say, which one? And you're like, actually, in fact, you want to succeed, you need both, right? They say, well, it's all intuition, it's all imagination, no data. Well, okay, flying blind. That sounds like a great idea. Right? On the other hand, part of what you do is you look at and you get all of this kind of data that helps you understand what the landscape is, understand what's going on, understand what you can build on top of it, without which you cannot operate effectively, but then it takes creative thinking and interesting thinking on top of it. And so this is one of those things where I have this thing where I talk about false dichotomies, and they say, well, is it math skills or imagination skills? And the answer is both, right? And so that's the kind of thing that, so my answer is both.
Okay, both. Is there a mindset shift that people need to make to embrace both of those to be effective in this new world? Is imagination more important today just because of the stakes or the speed by which things are happening?
Well, I think you have a faster clock by which you're coming up with imaginative decisions. Given that the speed of things is moving, that the ability to rethink your strategy, rethink how the marketplace is changing, rethink how your industry is changing, you need to be able to make those decisions at a faster clock. And so that is, I think, the difference. Because it used to be like, okay, you've invented a new piece of technology, like, for example, a steam engine. Well, actually, in fact, we're going to spend, 100 years just working on the steam engine and different things, and we're not actually moving on to other things. Mm-hmm. But now, actually, in fact, given data as a platform, given machine learning, given the progress, even though Moore's law looks like it's slowing down, but the progress in computing, because you can still add a ton within, kind of cloud server farms, all of that means that we're still at a very fast motion within industries.
So maybe we'll end it there with the speed lexicon, continuous intelligence, the analytics economy. We need to be able to make these decisions faster. Yep. Let's please thank Reid Hoffman for joining. So everyone in the Sumo community that's joining in on the webcast, thank you so much. We look forward to seeing you in the coming years here. Everyone that's in the room, we have a vibrant schedule throughout the day through 7 o'clock today, so looking forward to seeing you in the halls. That's a wrap on the keynote. See you in the next session. Thank you.